नाथ लोकेर जीवान आहा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पदाचाया आहा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पदाचाया हे बेजास कुसुत्रिभुवाना हे बेजास कुसुत्रिभुवाना प्रभुपाद पतित पवना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चादेशतारिणे 740 you will finish 740 okay Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Gauranita Jaya Gauranita Jaya Gauranita Jaya Gauranita. Jaya Nitai Chaitanya Chandra Nitai Gaura Chandra Gaura Hari. Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अबाई चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी जगत गुरु शिल प्रभुपाद की जय. नित्य लीला प्रविष्णु ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर शिल प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ षट गोस्वामी की प्रेम से कहो जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड श्री गिरि गोवर्धन की, ब्रजभूमि श्री वृंदावन धाम की, नवद्वीप श्री मायापुर धाम की, पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की, द मोस्ट मर्सिफुल लॉर्डशिप श्री श्री राधा नीलमाधव की, श्री श्री निताय चैतन्य चंद्र निताय गौरचंद्र की, श्री श्री राधा गिरिधारी जी की, श्री श्री गिरिराज गोवर्धन की, गंगामाई यमुना माई की, भक्ति देवी श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी की, शिला प्रभुपाद ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन एंड प्रसादम डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की, युग धर्म श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की, श्री हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की, समावेत भक्त वृंद की, जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी. जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी. गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारी. जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी. यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना. यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना. यमुना तेरा वनचारी यमुना तेरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यमुना तेरा वनचारी यमुना तेरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Nitai Chaitanya Chandra Nitai Gaura Chandra Gaura Hare. Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe. Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sandhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, I would like to confess up front, many senior devotees amongst the audience here. I would like to first offer my obeisances to them, because what I'm going to speak, as you all know, you can speak only based on your realizations, meaning that a small bird can fly only to a certain extent. If it is a big eagle or other big bird like Garuda, it can fly even higher. So yesterday I was His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu, who's not here, who's kindly, maybe he's hearing somewhere remotely. He called me up suddenly and then asked me to give me the Bhagavatam. There he is. He's asked to give me the Bhagavatam class. And as you all know, sitting in the Vyasasan, it's a hot seat. I don't think anybody is comfortable, especially when there are a lot of senior devotees who have much more deeper realizations on the instructions of Srila Prabhupada and Bhagavatam. But just as taking His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu and Saranga Thakur Prabhu's words as an instruction, I'm speaking something for my own purification. As I said, my realizations are not that great. I'm just a small bird trying to fly. At the same time, since it's an instruction by senior devotees, I'm just taking this up. So if I'm speaking anything wrong, or please feel free to correct or comment on it. So I was asked, at least I was filled in by Saranga Thakur Prabhu, that the topic of discussion is 8th canto, 10th chapter of the Bhagavatam. So just to kind of back up a little bit and summarize the 9th chapter, and then give a high-level summary of the 10th chapter. And then I'd like to share something that inspired me while reading this, the 8th chapter, 10th canto, the 6th verse was today's verse. So chapter 9, what we have been discussing, or what we have all been discussing in the temple is, this is regarding the churning of the milk ocean, this pastime of the churning of milk ocean. In the chapter 9, the demons were quarreling among themselves, right? And the Supreme Lord appears as Mohini Murti. So the churning of the milk ocean was complete, and then the nectar came out. So the demons somehow got it, and they were trying to grab it. At the same time, Supreme Lord, realizing that it's going to be a problem if the nectar is with the demons, he assumes a very beautiful form of a young lady called Mohini Murti, and he approaches them. As soon as the demons saw the Mohini Murti, or the beautiful, attractive Lord in the form of a beautiful lady, as you all know, Krishna, the word Krishna means all attractive. So any form he takes, whether it is Mohini Murti or Varaha avatar or Narasimha avatar, for the demons, he may feel like fearful, or may not like the form, but for the devotees he is very, very pleasing and effulgent. Just like to Prahlad Maharaj, when he sees Nrsimhadev, he didn't get fearful of it. He became so attracted, and he was the one who could go close to him. So similarly, when Lord takes any form, it's all attractive, because he is all attractive. Mohini Murti, when the Lord comes in as Mohini Murti, she actually warns the demons, saying that she cannot be trusted. So the Supreme Lord gave them an advance notice, saying that, I don't think you should trust me. But the demons, because they got attracted to the beautiful form of the Lord, they went ahead and said, no, okay, that's fine, we agree to that. You don't have to, we won't find fault, or we'll have trust in you. Whatever you say, we'll do. And then so the demons and the demigods, they sat down in rows, waiting for the nectar to be served. And as you all know, as it's already been discussed, that the nectar was distributed, everything was distributed to the demigods. But one demon sneaked in and sat next to Surya and Chandra. That's Rahu. So as soon as they realized Surya and Chandra realized that it was Rahu. They kind of let, and obviously Supreme Lord was all-knowing, immediately summoned the Sudarshan Chakra and cut off Rahu's head. But I think the Supreme Lord wanted to kind of show that how powerful the nectar is. So before it could get into the body of Rahu, his head was cut off, the nectar was in the mouth. The potency of the nectar is so much that the head of the Rahu became immortal. So that's why you see, it's stated in I was reading the purports. Prabhupada says that that's why you have these eclipses, because if Rahu comes in the middle of sun and moon, that causes eclipse. Fortunately, his head was only immortal, everything else was gone, because he was severed. Just he had touched the drop of nectar, and then it stayed, the head stayed. So one important point that I was thinking is, both the demigods and demons, they worked almost similarly in the churning of the ocean. Both of them put the same effort. But how come, that the demigods always win? I mean, the sense that demigods attained success because they got the nectar. The reason is because they are worshipping, or they are devotees of Lord Vishnu. So in the material world also we see many times, it's not very common, but at least in my experience I've seen that people struggle very, very hard. But on the other hand, the devotees, they do struggle. I'm not saying that it comes everything free for them, but when they don't have to put in so much of effort, because Krishna takes care of them. The demons on the other, the people on the materialistic people, they try to work every day and night, but sometimes they're not even able to meet their ends. So the lesson for me is to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So whatever we do, there is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm unable to remember that, Swalpamapi asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a small endeavor on this side, be able to cross over the dangers or greatest dangers. So that's the summary. And then also Supreme Lord, we have seen that also rewards people accordingly. So ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamiham. Bhagavad Gita 4:11. So if one is regarding him as his friend, as his well-wisher, as his protector, accordingly the Lord reciprocates with them. But if one is being envious of Krishna or Vishnu, it's going to be the same way, that they are not going to go too far. They're going to have the problem, and Lord is going to reciprocate to them in the same way, because it's their desire that Krishna is fulfilling, that Krishna wants how the devotee or how the person regards the Supreme Lord. He's going to reciprocate it that way. If you are in an envious mood, he's going to reciprocate the same way. If you are in a even if you're in a mood of service, obviously, and with love and devotion, you have the same reciprocation from the Lord. So the demons or the karmis, they use God property for their own sense gratification, obviously. So they basically have very firm faith that with their hard work, they can get anything. They say that if I do good, if I really work hard, I can achieve. To some extent they do, because they don't get any more farther than the destiny. Whatever is destined for them, the karmis I'm talking about, they can get to that level by doing the hard work. Whereas in case of the Supreme Lord Krishna, as I said, swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayatumaya, even a little bit of endeavor one does, it's very, very beneficial for them spiritually, because obviously he is the source of everything, and they can surpass the reactions of karma. So anything that is done for the Lord is reaction free or karma free. Anything that is done for our own sense gratification or personal happiness that is filled with, with karma. There are reactions to it that you have to face ultimately. And then, so the result, phalena parichayate. So the result is success or defeat of a person has to be understood by the results. So when the demons or the karmis, they perform some activities for sense gratification, they have to come back. They have to come back and transmigrate and go through the cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age. Whereas for devotees, they always go back to Godhead. Maybe it might not take just one lifetime, but many lifetimes. But at least ultimately, they are assured of a ticket back to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan. So that's the summary of chapter 9, where the scene is set. And chapter 10 is actually the battle between the demigods and the demons. When I was reading through those purports, I think that not most of them don't have any purports. It's a very translation. It sounded very similar to the Bhagavad Gita, the setting of the scene chapter, because there are like 40-50 verses that are explaining about who are the people who are ready to fight, what kind of weapons they're all having. What kind of carriers they are on. Some are on camels, some are on weird animals. So it was very interesting to see that. Of course, I have never read the 8th canto, but so far I'm honestly accepting the fact, but it was very interesting. Thank you, Radhakrishna Prabhu, for encouraging me to read. So it was a good read for me. So the verses 1 through 40 describe the fierce war between the demons and the demigods. The main reason for this war was because the demons didn't like the fact that the entire nectar was given out to the demigods. And I think later on, when I just summarize, I wanted to go to something and speak about the topic on envy, because that is the main cause. Because the demons, they were envious of the demigods. So I'll talk to that. That's one of the reasons why this war came about, right? Because the demons felt that they were not fair, the demigods were not fair. And since the whole nectar was distributed to the demigods, they didn't like the fact, and they started a war between the demigods and the demons. So the total chapter, the total verses in this 8th chapter, 10th canto, 57 verses. 1 to 40 is description of the war. How ghastly the war is, who are the commanders, what are the carriers. And then 41 to 52, we have a very important personality who comes up, a Bali Maharaj, the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj, attacks on the demigods. And then ultimately, as we all know, when the demigods raise their hands, they call out to Vishnu. So Vishnu comes in and kills all the demons. When I was reading this, I was actually thinking about the verse in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna artho jignasur artharti gnanicha bharatar sabha. So there are 4 kinds of people who take to the shelter of the Supreme Lord. So one is the artho, one who's desiring material desires, right? Distress, desirer of the wealth, the inquisitive, and who is searching for knowledge. So in this case, the reason I'm wanting to connect this is because the demigods, towards the end, they raise their hands and call out to Vishnu. They are in distress. So So Krishna says that even one does that, you're like, he's still my devotee. Obviously, the highest would be to serve the Supreme Lord favorably with love and devotion. At least, they are there a little bit, because they are not at least approaching the demigods for satisfying their condition if they are in distress or they need of wealth. So Prabhupada always used to say in that, better approach Krishna. Even if you want some material gain, just approach Krishna. The reason is because when you approach Krishna, he'll actually remove the material aspect of it, and he'll spiritualize the whole thing. Ultimately, you see that you become a devotee of the Supreme Lord. Though you have the intent of becoming materially opulent, just like Dhruva Maharaj. Because his whole purpose when he started was to become, get a kingdom greater than that of Lord Brahma. But then when he came into contact of, his devotees, Narada Muni, his spiritual master, and the Supreme Lord, all his material desires became spiritualized. And he never had any more desires to obtain the kingdom because he was so satisfied. So that's the intent. When Krishna says that, these four kinds of people approach me, they may be approaching with that intent. They may be approaching with the desire to have some money, some take care of some distress. But when you approach the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, Krishna, then those desires are all purified and one becomes a devotee, and all that it's cleansed. All the desires that are desiring, that the individual desires for personal satisfaction is reposed to the Supreme Lord. So that's the background or the summary. Jai Shishi Nitai Chaitanya Chandra Nitai Gaura Chandra, Jai Shishi Radha Giridhari, Jai Shishi Giriraj Govardhan, Jai Shishi Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. So today's verse is 8th chapter, 10th canto, 6th verse. Okay, so I'm going to read directly from there, since I don't have the book. Tatran yonyam sapatnaste samrabdha manasorine samasadhya sibhi baner nijagnur vividhayudai tatran yonyam sapatnaste samribdha manasorine samasadhya sibhir bhaner nijagnur vividhayudai tatran yonam sapatnaste samrabdha manasorine samasadhya sibhir bhaner nijagnur vividhayudai. Samrabdha manasorine samsadhya sibhir baner nijagnur vividhayudai tatranonam saptasne samrabdha manasorine samasadhya sibhir bhaner Nijagnurvividhayudai. Tatrayonam saptanaste samribdha manasorne समासाध्यासिभीर भाणेर निजग्नोर विविधायुधे. माताजी. तत्रान्योनम सपत्नास्ते समृब्ध मनसोर्णे समासाध्यासिभीर भाणेर निजाग्नोर विविधायुधे. तत्रान्योनम सपत्नस्ते समृब्ध मनसोर्णे समासाध्यासिभीर्भाणेर निजाग्नोर विविधायुधे. Could you just scroll up for the translation, please? Tatra, thereupon, annonyam, one another. Sorry, I'm not able to read from here. Sapatnaha, all of them becoming fighters. Stay, they. Samribdha, very angry. Manasa, within their minds. Rani, in that battle. Samasadhya, getting the opportunity to fight between themselves. Asibihi, with swords. Banai, with arrows. Nijagnuha, began to beat one another. Vividha Yudai, with varieties of weapons. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Both parties in that fight were extremely angry at heart, and in enmity they beat one another. They beat one another with swords, arrows, and varieties of weapons. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, thank you. There are always two kinds of men in this universe, not only on this planet, but also in higher planetary systems. All the kings dominating planets like the sun and moon also have enemies like Rahu. It is because of occasional attacks upon the sun and moon by Rahu that eclipses take place. The fighting between the demons and demigods is perpetual. It cannot be stopped unless intelligent persons from both sides take to Krishna consciousness. Very short purport, and as I said, not many verses in this chapter, at least until 38 or so, doesn't have any purports after this. So it's just explaining the setup or the setting of the scenes of the war, as to who are the different personalities, what are their carriers, and so on. We briefly talked about what Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in this purport about Rahu, because he tried to sneak in to get the nectar, and his head got cut off. But since the nectar touched his tongue, his head was mortal, but everything else was annihilated. And Prabhupada says in this purport that when the Rahu comes in between the sun and the moon, that's when we see eclipses. So the important point that I would like to share here today, as I was preparing for the class, is the topic of envy. Envy is something that is very deep-rooted within this material world. And I was hearing, so again, this is not my realizations, but what I've heard from senior devotees. I'm trying to speak for my own purification. Envy basically is the feeling that I have something, the other, the other person has something that I don't have. So I want that. I become envious of that position. Back in India, when I was a young kid, I grew up in India, so my advertisements and my other things are when I'm young in India, so I kind of talk about them. There was one very famous TV ad called as Onida, if you all remember. Neighbors envy, owners pride. That was the caption for that. Neighbors envy, owners pride. The one-liners would go with the product, right? So Onida was a TV brand within India when I grew up back in the 70s, 80s. So when I was reading this envy thing, I was recollecting that neighbors envy. So neighbors, you envy whatever you have, but it's the pride of the owner to have a Onida TV. So something that other person has and I don't have. So that's one of the main reasons why this entire battle between the demigods and the demons occurred. Because the demigods had something which the demons didn't have. They had that immortality, they got the nectar from Mohini Murti. Now they're trying to covet because they don't have that. And the other person would like to bring that other person down. That's typically envy. So I see there is something in another person that I don't have, and I try to bring down that person. That's the quality of envy. I was hearing that the envy is the only quality that is not there in the spiritual world. Because all the other qualities like the anger, there is a perverted reflection of that in the material world. But in the spiritual world, that's the pure greed and, pure anger and all those things. Like we see in the Leelas of Krishna, how the gopis and the gopas, they were all angry with Krishna. But that's not like real anger, what we see in this material world. It's all transcendental anger. But what I heard was the envy is the only quality that's not there in the spiritual world. Envy is only part of this material world. The root cause of envy is that we are envious of Krishna, right? I used to always wonder, how is that possible, How is that the root cause of Krishna? The root cause of envy is that I'm envious of Krishna. Because if you really look at it, everybody in this material world, or everybody in this creation is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. If we are envious towards other living entity, indirectly we are envious of the Supreme Lord, because He is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So ultimately, at the bottom line, if you look at things, if you are envious of a person or of something that other person has, that quality or the potency that the other person has is the gift. Or Krishna has actually decorated him with that quality, whatever he has. He may be very powerful, he may be very, very charismatic person. You see the sports stars, the film actors, the politicians, they're all very, very famous, and people are very attracted to them. There are some people who feel envious of their positions, but ultimately, if you look at that position was given to them by Krishna. So that's not something that they got because it has to be granted or blessed by the Supreme Lord. So since we are feeling envious of that person, we are indirectly feeling envious of Krishna. That's the root cause. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is one verse called Raga Dvesha Samutvena Dvanda Mohena Bharata. Raga and Dvesha. Covet, we try to covet what the other person has. Dvesha is we hate it because he has that. So if there is a king sitting on the throne, there is always feeling that I want to sit on the throne. Because raga, I am attached to that. That's the raga. And the dvesha part is, he has it, I don't have it. So that's the dvesha part of it. So that's the Bhagavad Gita verse that talks about envy. Ultimately, if we see the misuse of free will, or the independent that we are misusing of free will, which is causing us to have attitude towards the Supreme Lord. And having an attitude towards Supreme Lord is kind of very, very close to that envious position. So we come to a point where Krishna is respected. Obviously, we are devotees. We are not there. But indirectly also, if you look at it, if you try to envy some people who have some good qualities or who are really making good progress in the spiritual life, in their spiritual life, we try to, this person is getting all the attention, this person is getting all the respect. We try to become envious of that person. Ultimately, so we have to come to the point, and how do we remedy this envy? The remedial measures that we need to take is to serve people who we are envious to, who we are envious about. So it is said that our acharyas, the Rupa Goswami, they have very clearly say that they have the distinction of seniors, peers, and juniors. It's not for trying to control others, or it's not for showing that you are great, but it's just to kind of serve. So in senior devotees or senior Vaishnavas, we take their association. We look up to them. We seek their guidance. We seek their association. In peers, we associate with them, share, have spiritual friendship. And who are a little, new people who are just coming into Krishna consciousness, we try to, extend ourselves, assist them on their journey towards Krishna. So when we do this, the quality of envy, reduces gradually. Like envy is not that easy to go away. It's very, very pernicious in this material world. You have envy everywhere. You're envious of seniors, you're envious of your peers, you're envious of juniors, and envy of juniors is actually shown by controlling. So when you see that somebody is new, you try to control them. You have to do how I say. That's something that. But when we are in a mood of service also seeing everything in relation to Krishna. Because ultimately, as I said earlier, ultimately we are envious of Krishna because Krishna has blessed a soul with certain qualities. So if you are envious of that soul, we are envious of Krishna. So when we try to cultivate the mood of service, it has to be in relation to Krishna. Because when you see everything in relation to Krishna, then it becomes perfect. But if you just have on a bodily platform that relationship, you are my friend, so I'm trying hard to inculcate not to be envious of you. We may sustain for some time, but it is not like long term. But if you see everything in relation to Krishna, then everything is perfect because you're seeing everything in relation to Krishna. And one great example that I heard in one of the lectures, one Maharaj was saying that the process of bhakti is very, very powerful, especially in helping us get to that service mode. And it was a very wonderful analogy that I heard that Srila Prabhupada actually spoke. That devotees are like, the bhakti process is like blacksmith process, but not goldsmith. There's a difference between blacksmith and goldsmith. Because, blacksmith is, you put the iron with just one shot, it gets straightened up or whatever it is. Whereas the goldsmith keeps on tapping, many number of times to make some ornaments or something like that. So the bhakti process is like, the blacksmith approach, Prabhupada said. So it's very, very powerful. So if one doesn't have, in other words, I'll say it positively, if one comes to the process of bhakti, then it's easy for them to be in a mood of service. Because all the aspects of bhakti automatically create that opportunity of service to the devotees, to the deities, everybody. And we know many, many examples of people who are envious when Krishna was present. The famous example is Shishupal. He was an envy personified. He couldn't stand Krishna at all, Shishupal. So it is said, I heard this in one of the lectures from a senior devotee, that when Shishupal was born, he was born screaming. He was literally screaming, like crying. We have seen some kids do that, but of course, obviously not like Shishupal. But he was screaming for a whole month because he had heard someone say Krishna's name. That much envy he had for the Supreme Lord. And obviously, at the end of the day, you know that his head was cut off by Krishna Sudarshan Chakra. But the beauty of Krishna consciousness, the beauty of being envious of Krishna, though it is not recommended, it is always recommended to be favorably serving the Lord. Because Krishna and Kamsa, all these people, they were also thinking about Krishna, but they were not thinking favorably. They were Kamsa was thinking in a mood of fear. Oh, Krishna will come and kill me. Whereas Shishupal was thinking about very, very envious of Krishna. He couldn't stand. He tried to attach, arms to Shishupal. Poundarka, sorry. Yeah, I got confused. Thank you, Prabhu. So he was very, very envious of Krishna, Shishupal. So, and then once, as I was sharing this pastime that, he was there, he was crying for a month, and then because he heard the name of Krishna. But I got back again. So the beauty of that, even if one enviously or fearfully thinks about Krishna, Krishna is very kind that he gave liberation, Sahajya Mukti, to Shishupal. Because as soon as his head was cut off, the spark within from his body went and merged with Krishna. So, the Pandavas became, very, very curious. How is this possible that a person who is so envious of the Supreme Lord can get Sahajya Mukti, liberation of merging into the Supreme Lord? So that's when Jai Shri Shri Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. So I'm almost done here. We are out of time. So thank you for bearing with me. So Narad Muni and Pandavas actually asked Narad Muni, how is this possible that Shishupal is such an envious person, but how did he get liberated? Then Narad Muni says that that's actually the potency of chanting the Krishna's holy name. So it's not Shishupal's greatness, it's the greatness of the Lord's name. So even if one chants enviously or fearfully, or Ajamila who chanted unintentionally, Narayana, the Vishnu Dutas came and saved him from the Yamadutas. So the ultimate thing is the envy, as we were discussing, by cultivating the mood of service, one can overcome the quality of envy. And as it relates to this pastime of churning the ocean and the demons and devotees fighting, it is the basic quality I was thinking about was envy that was causing the demons and demigods to fight. There's also, in the spiritual world, there is no envy, as this wonderful pastime of Srimati Radharani, where Srimati Radharani encourages everybody, all the other gopis and devotees, to serve the Supreme Lord. So if Radharani were to be envious, then I don't think she'll be considered as a topmost devotee. Because her mood is, how can this soul get mercy of Krishna? And once that soul gets mercy of Krishna, she becomes happy. In other words, we as devotees, when we see other great devotees or other devotees performing service nicely to the Supreme Lord, we should become happy, not become envious, because he is serving nicely, he is speaking nicely, he is doing kirtan nicely, or whatever it could be. We have to follow in the footsteps of our previous acharyas who set an example, because the 6 Goswamis, they are called Nirmatsaranam Satam. They don't have envy. So when we follow and serve such great devotees, that's one way of also getting that quality. If you associate with someone who has certain qualities, we also automatically get those qualities. Today also happens to be just a little short two-liner. I'm sorry of going over the time. I was reminded that there is also today is the disappearance day of Bhugarbha Goswami and also Kasishwara Pandit. They are great devotees in the Chaitanya Leela. So for us, the Chaitanya Leela and Krishna Leela, they're non-different, because Lord Chaitanya is same as the Supreme Lord Krishna. Bhugarbha Goswami was formerly known as Prema Manjari. He was a friend of Lokanatha Goswami, who is one of the other acharyas in our disciplic succession. And he was instrumental in construction of the Gokulananda temple. So there are very famous temples in Vrindavan. As we all know, we know Gopinath, we know Govinda temple, Gopinath temple, Madan Mohan temple. Those are primary Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana deities. Then there's Radha Raman, Shama Sundar, Radha Damodar and Gokulananda. So Bhugarbha Goswami was instrumental in constructing the Gokulananda temple. Kashishwara Pandit lived with Lord Chaitanya. He is a very close associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He lived with Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. Very confidential associate of Lord Chaitanya. He was also a contemporary. He was a disciple of Ishwara Puri. As you know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also a disciple of Ishwara Puri. And he was Kashishwara Pandit was a very strong devotee, very strong and well built. So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to go to Jagannath Puri to take the darshan of the Supreme Lord, he used to protect Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the crowds, like how you protect, And then other service that he did was also distributing of prasadam to the devotees after kirtan. So I'd like to conclude and stop my my sharing of whatever I know, and thank you, Radha Krishna Prabhu, for this opportunity, and also correcting me because I got mistaken with Sushipal and Poundraka. So any comments or corrections? I won't say any questions because I'll direct all my questions to the senior devotees. If you have any comments or corrections, please let me know.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for a nice class. So, Prabhuji, the Samudra Manthan